Okay, got it all set up finally here. Welcome to the next installment of the painting Valan Luca process videos. I apologize if I look a little bit sleepy today. It was kind of a weird week just with dealing with, I stayed up too late one night doing laundry for my son, just random dad stuff. Because he needed clothes for the morning and put them in too late, and then my laundry machine has been on the fritz. Anyways, so I'm a little bit tired, and I've been working out in the mornings, and so I'm a little sleepy. So in this video, you're going to see basically the next stages of completing the painting. After the blocking was completed, I felt like I wanted to add a little bit more details into the piece. Should make sure this is working. All right, it's working perfectly. So I'm gonna just continue on with the video. Apologize, I had to just cut there for a sec to make sure it was working. But yeah, after I got the blocking in, I felt like it looked too much like Ryan Reynolds in a weird red suit. So I thought it would be fun to explore some of the, I guess more nuances of what I imagine Valan Luca looking like in my head. And so I always imagined that he had this like sort of old school like circus ringmaster, showman beard and mustache is kind of how I imagine him, with his kind of slick, cool hair. So that's what I imagine when I think of Valan Luca, and so that's what I went ahead with. But essentially at this stage in the process, it's just a matter of refinement from here on forward. So, if you recall before, I was talking about general to specific. So this is where we start getting into the specifics of smaller areas around the face. And you'll see my brush strokes will be small, and they'll be I'm just starting to refine the details, and it's like I said before, when you get to this stage in the painting, it's basically just narrowing in on a spot or spots of the portrait and going through that same process of like blocking stuff in. So I'll grab an area that I need to refine and look at what's there, and I'll block in a color, and then I'll refine the edges. I'll bring lighter colors in over top. And as you can see, I'm just color picking mostly from the existing colors that I've established at this point on the canvas. There won't be a lot of additional colors thrown in at this stage. There might be some towards the end, but for this sort of like part of the process, I'm mostly just picking colors from my existing palette that's there. One of the things that I'd like to maybe try in the future is doing some more leveraging the powers of Photoshop a little bit further upon completion of this stage of painting. My business partner and I have been watching some videos on digital painting by, I forget her name. She's a digital artist. I apologize. But basically she does paintings that are similar to what a lot of people have been doing these days. If you look on Instagram, a lot of the artists that are getting lots and lots of exposure and lots of followers are creating, I think they call it semi-realism. And so it's like kind of a blend of realistic work, but pushing more towards like the Disney aesthetic. So big eyes, cute proportions, a lot of girls. So like the painting's subject matter is a lot of like girls with like very pretty features, and very like polished and airbrushed kind of looking. I don't see myself going that direction in terms of painting. It's not my bag. But what I have noticed in the way that this person works, what she does is she's very, very deliberate and slow with her process. and just very, very minor small adjustments that she's making to areas of the painting while she's working, which really is similar to what I'm doing. It's just I'm a little more aggressive with my mark making, so a lot more aggressive with my mark making, so the pieces tend to have a little bit more roughness to them. And that's one of the reasons why I struggle with painting women, is because maybe it's because of my own face. I look at myself in the mirror and you can see like my age is showing stuff more than it used to. But I guess I'm used to seeing more like chunks in a facial feature, even in like Ryan Reynolds here with his forehead wrinkles, and that those lines around the eyes and stuff. I really like those aspects of facial features, and they kind of lend well to my stylistic approach to painting. So I find women are a little bit harder to paint for that reason, because they tend to have softer features for the most part. So this lady, when she paints, it's a lot of airbrushing and a lot of like very delicate layering. And then at the very end, she uses Photoshop in a very interesting way to make a lot of color adjustments to try to push her work to where she wants it to be. And it's interesting. I haven't explored it at all, but it is something that I've seen a lot of artists doing. I tend to just paint, just straight painting. So I don't use a lot of adjustment layers. If anything, I'll use a layer or two. If I want to darken shadows, I might use a layer set to multiply, where I'll just do a light coloring over top, which just darkens areas. And then also maybe a layer set to either overlay or like color dodge, to really blow out some areas of tone or color and bring a lot of brightness in there. So that's basically the extent of my own sort of like playing in terms of leveraging the higher end technical aspects of the software that I'm using, or I guess in this case, like I'm using Fresco here, but I would bring it into. I always bring my work onto my computer to get it ready to put on social media, or if I'm going to send it to print, to get it ready to print. So I'm working inside of Photoshop at some point, and Photoshop, the native program of Photoshop on the computer has a lot of bells and whistles that Fresco does not. And it's also much easier to work inside of Photoshop on the computer as opposed to trying to do stuff like that on my iPad with the pencil alone. So I'm not using a keyboard with my iPad. So like the shortcuts are, I'm not utilizing a keyboard for shortcuts on my iPad, I guess is what I'm trying to say. At any rate, getting back to the piece here. So you can see oftentimes what I do, what helps me in my process when I get to this stage of refinement, I usually will focus in on the eyes and the mouth first. Those are the essential components for me to be able to feel like I'm capturing the likeness and the believability of the face that I'm painting. And so I'll try to get those narrowed or nailed down as best I can right away. So you can see I kind of started with the left eye, and I think I usually do actually start with the left eye for some reason. I'm not sure what that is, but I haven't done a study on the psychology around painting faces. I'm sure there's something to it in terms of where a person tends to begin or focus on. There's probably something to it. At any rate, so I've kind of rendered the eye, the left eye, to a stage where I feel like it's pretty solid. And then, from there I sort of jump around, and I'll maybe focus down on the mouth. And then I'll jump back to the other eye, and then I'll work on the forehead. But yeah, it's getting the features of the eye and the mouth, eyes and the mouth are essential, because in a portrait, I mean, this is going to be your focal point, right? Just this area right here is going to be your focal point in a portrait. The ears are not as important. When we look at people and we're talking to somebody, we're usually focusing on their eyes or their mouth. And So at first glance, at a quick glance, for the audience, it's important for me to get those aspects as accurate as I can if I'm going for a likeness of somebody, so that on a quick glance somebody could be like, whoa, that face looks familiar, who is that? And then they can start to kind of dig into the rest of the piece from there. It's quite simple in some ways. A portrait is quite simple in some ways in terms of compositional considerations. It's mostly just, if you look at the rule of thirds in this piece, you can see like basically his left eye is at like a third of the vertical of the painting. So if I have the painting's a square, if you divide it into 3 equal divisions, where the eye sits is a third of that picture plane. And then normally I like to make a rule of thirds, which is, you know, I would have something sit on a third here or a third lower, and then I'll have it sit on a third vertically as well. So you're going to divide your picture into a third, 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 third. I usually like to find that corner on the third as like or on the lower bottom, whatever the case may be. But compositionally, that produces a strong composition. They call it the rule of thirds in art, and so that will give you a strong composition. In this case, is the eye line up this horizontally is on a third, right about here. His face is kind of sitting in the center, so I'm not really adhering to that thirds on the vertical plane, but that's okay. In one sense, the direction of his gaze is pushing the viewer towards where that third would land. So I think it's kind of forgivable a little bit because, you know, sitting on that third and then looking out is going to sort of, it creates that third and third in an abstract or a meta way, I suppose. So here you can see, again, it's about developing light and shadow and working in smaller spaces from general to specific. So like I'm working on his forehead right now and just really looking at the photograph, looking at the tones in the photograph and trying to, you know, break down those larger chunks of tone into smaller, more succinct details. And as I jump around the painting that way, that's all that I'm doing. Is just kind of going through this process. It's almost like the process of carving into clay, or, you know, working with Play-Doh or whatever. You know, whatever an appropriate analogy is. If you start with a lump of clay, you got to carve away the big chunks, and then you slowly carve away smaller pieces to form and shape it. And painting is very similar, drawing is very similar, and it's all designed, it's all with the same goal of tricking the eye, right? So in the case of, you know, a painting like this, we're working on a 2D plane, but the hope and the goal is to, you know, try and fool the eye, right? You're trying to fool the eye. Sorry, I just messed up my... There we go. Sorry. I've got it playing here because this is how I do it, is I play it while I talk to you guys. But I was trying to see how much time I had to talk, and I stopped the video. But okay, so yeah, you can see I'm like jumping around in the video, the capture of my painting. I'm jumping around now. So at this stage of things, when I've got it's fairly developed at this point, and once I get sort of a fairly developed, almost complete rendering, I will start to jump around quite a bit more and just touch multiple areas. Like in a 10-minute section of painting, I might hit every area of the face, just kind of going around refining areas, different components of the face. I should say this section, or this this output of this part of the painting, I've sped up quite a bit, because like 500%, it was like 2 hours of painting, and so like this section was 2 hours long, and I felt like with the speed that it's at, you should be able to get a fairly good idea of what I'm doing. So now you can see, I've kind of gone in, I've done a majority of the building of the forms and stuff is completed, and now I'm sort of doing highlights. And so what I'll usually do is at the end, I'll get the painting completed for the most part, and that's when, at the very end, is when I'll sort of add in highlights, like specular light on his eyes, highlights on the nose, wherever those bright spots are, because during the process, those just get painted over. I can't like put that in and paint around it. Those are bright highlights like that are usually the last thing that I'll include into a portrait, into a painting, because they're, in a sense, they sort of sit on the surface. They sit forward in front of most of everything else visually, and so it makes sense to add them, at the end. In this case, with this piece, I was quite happy with the tone and the color, how it all came together. Sometimes I wrestle with color a little bit, but I felt like this all came together quite well. Now you'll see, so at this stage of the piece, I'll create an extra layer above the finished painting. And you'll notice, like in a lot of my recent paintings, I've been adding these sort of abstract elements over top of the painting, or in the painting. And that is, it's a bit of riffing off of Alpe Efe's work. I really love his portraiture, and he does these sort of abstract scrapings and stuff like that over top of his portraits. So it's a little bit of like borrowing from him, but it also feels quite natural for me, because it's like I've said to you, I think a few times, that I think I have more of a natural tendency towards like abstract expressionism in terms of the way that I render stuff, and the way that I work. So including sort of these chunky areas of texture and sort of scrapings and lines and stuff like that feels natural. It also reflects my expertise with graphic design. So there's an element to this that's sort of very designy in terms of playing with lines and sort of aspects of paint which are void of meaning other than drawing the eye around the canvas or creating texture or mood. And that to me is like it's a nice aspect that I can bring in that feels familiar to my background, and I really enjoy that. So that's something that I've been working at in a majority of my pieces. You'll see that these days, especially with these portraits, and it's kind of become a bit of a staple with the portraits, and something that I'm trying, because I feel that it maybe brings a little bit of nuance into the pieces that wouldn't be there otherwise. Looks like we're at the end here. So yeah, I hope this was useful for you guys. I tried to make this one just a little bit shorter. I really do want your feedback, so I'd like to know if this format works. This one was a bit quicker. Of course, I could render out the 2 hours and just throw it up for you if you're interested to see like a super long video of this process. But you've all kind of said that this sort of works for you, and so everybody who's watched these has said that it kind of works, and sort of my thought process around what I'm doing. You said it's kind of interesting to see those things. So this is how I think I'm going to go for it, unless somebody absolutely has a dislike for it. So I hope you've enjoyed this rendering of Valan Luca, and with this one, this concludes the Valan Luca series. I think the next one that I'm going to do is Ingatar Shinawa, which is Amar Chadha as the actor who's been cast as him. I believe I did all the screen capping for that. Let me just double check here. I'm pretty sure I recorded the process for that. I recorded the process for Gareth Bryn for sure. Oh yeah, I've got Chadha Patel in here too. So I think I'll do that one next. The fun thing about that one is I tried to draw the drawing without my tracing cheat that I've been doing. And so that's good. You'll be able to see kind of where my where I'm hitting a wall with that, and why I shortcut things. I was talking with my business partner about it more this week, about just the frustration that I have with my development and where I'm at with my skill level. And we can I'll talk more about that when I do this video. But yeah, thank you for checking it out, and thank you so much for sticking around in my Patreon. And please share if you know anybody who's interested in this kind of work or what I'm doing on my Patreon. Please share it around. I really am trying to get it out there and trying to grow the Patreon. So your support in that way is so appreciated. So until next time, be good to each other, and I'll check in with you later. Thanks.